I'm 75 now, and I can't remember anybody except the Queen bee.
The most devastating royal rejection did not arrive through a public decree or a carefully worded palace statement. It happened behind one ancient door. Edward, Earl of Wessex, personally led Catherine into a sealed chamber containing jewels hidden for generations, then ordered the entrance closed while Camilla remained outside. She heard the lock turn. Catherine saw what waited inside, and within seconds, the balance of royal power had visibly changed. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Edward moved through the guarded residence, leading Catherine below the staterooms and into a passage known to trusted attendants. She had expected a historical briefing. Yet when the guard stepped aside, the Earl used an iron key to open a chamber untouched by palace routine. The collection was not part of the crown's displayed holdings, meaning the jewels did not belong to pieces used by the monarch. They formed an older family inheritance, protected through private custodianship, a duty giving one guardian responsibility for preserving and passing them forward. Catherine stopped when Edward lifted the velvet covering. A diamond and emerald parure rested beneath it, a matched set of jewels created to be worn together, but its beauty carried a warning. He told her plainly that she was being granted custodial access to the ancient Wessex collection. This was no casual viewing. It was an act of trust, and she understood that accepting it could deepen the strain between her and Camilla. Still, the future queen did not reach for the necklace. She stared in silence, weighing duty against the suffering beyond the door. Camilla stood in the corridor with one gloved hand against the wood. Her embarrassment hardened when an attendant lowered his eyes and confirmed that Edward's order could not be overruled. The queen consort demanded why Catherine had entered while she had been refused, but no answer came fast enough to contain her anger. Edward then revealed through a documented custodial account that the jewels had been hidden after an old family dispute. They could be opened only during a crisis involving legitimacy, loyalty, or succession. Beside the central necklace lay a handwritten card. Catherine recognized the late queen's handwriting, and her breath caught. The chamber had not merely survived for generations. It had been prepared for her. Before she could finish reading, raised voices broke through the corridor. Camilla was demanding who had authorized her exclusion. The jewels had been revealed, but the deeper wound lay outside the chamber, where a humiliated queen consort was already deciding that the locked door would not remain unanswered. To understand why one locked door carried such explosive power, the people standing on either side of it must be understood. Catherine saw duty. Edward saw a promise that had survived the late queen's death. Camilla saw an insult designed to erase everything she had fought to secure. None of them entered that corridor emotionally unarmed, and each believed the ancient jewels represented something far greater than diamonds, inheritance, or ceremonial splendor. Catherine sat alone at the narrow table, unable to take her eyes from the covered cases. As the future queen, the woman expected to stand beside William when he eventually became monarch. She already knew that even her smallest choices could be treated as statements of power. Public expectations had grown around her, while private strain had taught her to move carefully. Now that caution was being tested. She told Edward she had never asked to be placed above another royal woman, especially through an act certain to wound Camilla. He listened without interrupting, then answered quietly that responsibility was rarely entrusted to those who chased it. The Earl had spent years avoiding open conflict, but his silence had never meant ignorance. He knew the family's private promises, sealed instructions, and unresolved disputes better than many who spoke with greater authority. Camilla dismissed her attendants and remained outside alone. She heard Catherine's voice through the door, and the pain on her face deepened into something more dangerous. The queen consort had survived years of judgment to secure her place beside Charles, yet the refusal suggested that acceptance inside the family could still be withdrawn. She did not fear the jewels themselves. She feared what their denial appeared to say, that her title could command ceremony but could not guarantee trust. Every passing second strengthened that fear, and every lowered voice in the corridor made the rejection feel deliberate. Edward opened a documented custodial account, a written record explaining who protected the collection and under what conditions it could be passed forward. He told Catherine that the jewels had been removed from ordinary royal circulation, meaning they could no longer be freely chosen for official appearances, after a bitter dispute over access and status. Someone had once tried to use them to create authority rather than honor inheritance. He also revealed that Charles had been told only that a heritage review, a private examination of historic royal property, was taking place. The king did not know the chamber would open, who would enter, or that his wife would be excluded. Edward placed the small iron key in Catherine's palm and folded her fingers around it. She immediately tried to return it, but he closed the wooden case and said the decision had already been made. Outside, Camilla sent Charles one message: "Your brother has crossed a line." The monarch read it during a private meeting, stared at the screen, and dismissed everyone without explanation. Charles now knew that his wife had been left outside, but he did not yet know the hidden incident that had convinced Edward the door had to close. The exclusion had not begun that morning. True origin lay months earlier, during a private memorial ceremony that should have united the royal family. Instead, one whispered instruction, one altered display, and one stunned reaction convinced Edward that the ancient collection was no longer safe within ordinary palace control. Everyone later remembered that ceremony differently, but for the Earl, it became the exact moment trust was broken beyond repair. Edward had spent years cataloging objects connected to the late Queen, working quietly through letters, ceremonial pieces, and heirlooms kept outside the Crown's most visible collections. The Crown referred to property formerly held for the sovereign's official role, while these private family items were protected by personal arrangements and inherited duties. That distinction mattered because the objects carried memory without automatically belonging to whoever held the highest title. Camilla had begun pressing for a clearer place in heritage decisions. As queen consort, the title given to the reigning king's wife, she believed she required access to pieces used during family commemorations, diplomatic receptions, and future state occasions. To her, visibility created authority. To Edward, memory required restraint. Camilla crossed the line during a closed memorial ceremony at St. George's Chapel. The service had been arranged privately to honor the late Queen, with an antique Wessex emerald brooch placed inside a display beside her handwritten letters. Minutes before the family entered, she instructed an attendant to remove it and position it near her own seat. Edward noticed the empty space immediately. He found the Queen consort behind the chapel screen and demanded to know why the arrangement had changed. She did not retreat. She told him the jewel would carry more meaning when seen on the Queen than behind glass. Edward felt something inside him harden. The memorial had been created to honor a woman they had lost, but Camilla's decision had turned remembrance into a statement of rank. He took the brooch back himself and restored it to the display as the organ began. His hands shook, yet he refused to let waiting guests see the conflict unfolding behind the ceremony. Catherine witnessed the final moments of the confrontation and saw the pain he could not hide. Later, she found him alone in the vestry, a private room used by clergy and royal participants before or after services. She told him quietly that preserving memory sometimes demanded the courage to disappoint powerful people. Edward returned home that evening and reopened a sealed envelope entrusted to him through the late Queen's documented instructions. The message warned that the hidden jewels must never be controlled by anyone who confused possession with belonging. It named the qualities required of their next custodian: restraint, continuity, public trust, and the strength to protect family memory without using it for personal elevation. He read the list twice. Each quality pointed toward Catherine. Edward understood what his decision would cost. Camilla would not see preservation. She would see an attack on her queenship. The memorial incident explained Edward's decision, but when Camilla finally faced him across the corridor, history gave way to anger, and the family dispute became impossible to conceal. When the chamber door reopened, no one moved. Catherine stood beside Edward with the iron key still in her hand. Camilla waited only a few feet away, stripped of the calm expression she had worn through decades of royal scrutiny. There were no cameras, no public smiles, and no aides prepared to soften the words. For the first time, the three of them faced what the jewels had exposed. Trust had become more powerful than title. Catherine stepped into the corridor, carrying no necklace, brooch, or crown, only the key and the late Queen's folded message. That restraint made the moment heavier. She had not emerged displaying victory, yet Camilla still saw the proof of exclusion resting in her hand. Edward ordered the remaining attendants to withdraw. A custodial instruction was a private written order, naming who must protect an inheritance and control access to it. Once the corridor emptied, no official could interrupt, soften an accusation, or hide the damage behind palace language. Camilla stared at Edward. "By what authority did you admit her and deny me?" Her voice was controlled, but the anger beneath it was unmistakable. He answered that he had acted under instructions written before her marriage to Charles, and protected from changes in royal rank. The Earl did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His calm made the refusal feel even more final. Camilla turned toward Catherine and accused her of accepting a calculated humiliation. The future queen answered immediately that she had entered without knowing anyone had been deliberately left outside. She would never have chosen to wound another woman in that way, especially one standing beside the king. Yet the explanation brought no relief. To the queen consort, ignorance did not erase the image of Catherine inside, while she waited beyond a locked door. Catherine offered to surrender the key until Charles could settle the dispute. Edward stopped her before she could extend her hand. He said, returning it would violate the late queen's documented decision and turn duty into something negotiable. Camilla's expression changed. She heard only one message. The future queen's burden mattered more than the present queen consort's dignity. Camilla reached toward the key. Catherine closed her fingers around it without thinking. Silence followed. The gesture was defensive, not aggressive, but it carried the force of a declaration. Edward then revealed from the sealed custodial account that access was merely the first stage. The appointed guardian could decide when the jewels returned to royal life and which future women would wear them. Catherine had received hereditary influence, authority passed forward through family instructions that Charles could not easily reverse. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor. The king had arrived after reading Camilla's message, certain his authority would end the confrontation. The confrontation had divided the corridor, but the arrival of the king would reveal whether a crown could overturn a promise made before he inherited it. Charles entered expecting a family disagreement. What he found was a limit to his own power. His wife stood wounded, his brother stood immovable, and Catherine held a key attached to instructions written by the late queen herself. The king could dismiss courtiers, alter household duties, and reshape public ceremony. Yet the chamber belonged to a private inheritance structure, deliberately built to survive royal pressure. For once, command would not guarantee control. Charles did not begin with accusation. He asked to see every governing document before discussing anyone's conduct. Edward opened a leather case and produced a sealed custodial deed, a private letter, and a historical inventory signed by witnesses years earlier. A custodial deed was a legal record naming who must guard property and control how it is used. The papers showed that the jewels had been separated from ordinary crown holdings through a family trust, an arrangement protecting private assets for future generations, instead of placing them under the monarch's direct ceremonial control. That distinction mattered because the king could lead the institution, but he could not simply seize an inheritance designed to resist personal pressure. Charles carried the late queen's letter toward the narrow window and began reading. Anger held his face for several lines, then slowly gave way to grief. He recognized his mother's phrasing, her careful warnings, and the quiet firmness she used whenever she expected the family to resist her wishes. The monarch understood that she had anticipated this exact conflict. She had known one woman might feel excluded, another might feel burdened, and her sons might be forced to choose between loyalty and promise. Camilla stepped closer and asked her husband to order the chamber reopened. Charles did not answer. His silence struck harder than refusal, because it suggested he might defend his mother's decision over his wife's dignity. The queen consort looked toward him for reassurance, but the king continued reading. Edward finally spoke. He told his brother he had never intended to embarrass Camilla, yet admitting her would have broken the promise he had sworn to uphold. His voice faltered when he mentioned that oath. Charles set down the papers, removed his glasses, and pressed 2 fingers against his eyes. Then he turned to Catherine and asked whether she was prepared to carry the burden, not whether she desired the privilege. Catherine answered that she would accept only if the collection remained a family trust and never became a weapon against Camilla. Her condition changed the room. She was not claiming victory, she was placing restraint above power. Charles confirmed that the deed was valid and refused to overturn Edward's action. He ordered everyone to remain silent until the household could prepare for the consequences. Camilla turned before leaving and warned him that silence would not protect the monarchy once staff began asking why she had been barred from a chamber opened for Catherine. Charles had chosen restraint over intervention, but the palace could not contain the meaning of that choice, and the first signs of fallout appeared before the corridor was empty. By evening, no official announcement had been made, yet the palace already felt different. Staff members lowered their voices when Catherine passed. Camilla cancelled one engagement without explanation. Charles remained behind a closed study door, while Edward personally returned the ancient inventory to its safe. The secret had not reached the public, but its emotional consequences were moving through the household like a fracture beneath polished stone, silent, invisible, and impossible to stop. Senior staff received strict instructions to describe the chamber visit as a private heritage inspection. The phrase meant a closed examination of historic family property, not a transfer of authority. Yet no one believed the wording could hide what had happened. Camilla's sudden departure had already been noticed, and the cancelled engagement turned private tension into palace suspicion. Catherine reached her sitting room carrying the iron key and the late Queen's note. William listened as she briefed him, and the prince understood at once that the key represented extraordinary trust and a dangerous new fault line running through his father's household. Camilla returned to her rooms, removed her gloves, and placed them sharply on the table. An aide asked whether the evening schedule should continue. "Nothing continues as though this did not happen," she replied. The queen consort was not only angry about being denied access, she feared the family had quietly placed Catherine above her in the one realm where titles offered no protection, inherited trust. Catherine admitted to William that she felt complicit in another woman's humiliation, despite having no part in arranging it. He reminded her that refusing the responsibility would not reopen the door or erase Camilla's pain. It would only leave the ancient collection vulnerable. The future king spoke carefully, but he could see the burden settling over his wife. She had been given something precious, yet every part of it carried suffering. Charles visited Camilla without advisors. She asked whether he would have tolerated his mother being treated in the same way. The king searched for an answer, but found none that could comfort her. His silence deepened the distance between them, and she understood that he still could not choose between defending his wife and honoring the late queen's command. Edward opened the historical inventory again, and discovered a missing page. The absent entry described a final jewel called the Wessex Star, whose location had never been publicly recorded. Meanwhile, Catherine unfolded the personal note and found one chilling sentence instructing the new custodian to seek the peace withheld from every woman who mistook precedence for permanence. Catherine read the words aloud to William, then stopped. Beneath them stood a handwritten date matching the approaching anniversary of the late Queen's accession, the day a sovereign formally begins a reign. He realized the chamber reveal had never been the final act. Someone had prepared a second private test, and his wife would face it without Edward, Charles, or palace rules shielding her. The first revelation had divided the family, but the missing jewel would force Catherine into a private meeting where rank, anger, and ancient instructions could no longer speak for either woman. The turning point came without ceremony. No courtiers stood nearby, no documents waited on a table, and no locked chamber separated them. Catherine asked Camilla to meet privately in a small morning room before sunrise. She arrived carrying the iron key, but wearing no royal insignia. Camilla entered alone. For the first time since the Exclusion, they faced each other not as future queen and queen consort, but as two women shaped by judgment, survival, and fear. Catherine had rejected formal mediation because she knew officials would turn pain into procedure. Mediation meant a controlled meeting designed to settle conflict through advisors, but advisors would only force both women to defend their positions. She wanted the truth without palace language. Camilla agreed because Charles had refused to invalidate the family trust, the arrangement protecting the jewels for future generations. Her final chance to influence what happened now depended on speaking directly to the woman holding the key. Catherine placed it between them and promised she would never use the ancient collection to diminish Camilla. The queen consort studied the iron object, but did not touch it. "The damage was done when that door closed," she said. Her voice carried no explosion now, only exhaustion. Being left outside had awakened the oldest fear of her royal life, that public acceptance could be granted before crowds, then quietly withdrawn when family memory became stronger than marriage. Camilla admitted she had fought for years to stand beside Charles without appearing temporary. Every ceremony, every title, and every public duty had seemed to prove that she finally belonged. Yet one locked chamber had exposed how fragile that belonging still felt. Catherine listened without interruption. She understood that the anger had never been only about jewels. It was about surviving judgment, then discovering that survival had not erased doubt. Catherine confessed her own fear. She did not want to become a symbol used against living people, especially by those eager to turn succession into a contest between royal women. The future queen refused to inherit authority built upon another person's humiliation, even when she disagreed with that person's choices. Her honesty weakened the last defense between them. Camilla then revealed through a private recorded conversation that she knew where the missing Wessex star had been kept. The late queen had given it to her temporarily years earlier, with instructions never to wear it and to return it when the rightful custodian appeared. She had hidden the jewel because surrendering it meant admitting she had never been intended as its final guardian. Camilla removed a small case from her handbag and pushed it toward Catherine. Her hand remained on the lid for several seconds. Then she let go. The private test was complete, but the moment of peace arrived too late to contain the story. News of the locked chamber had already escaped beyond palace walls. Inside the morning room, a private surrender had prevented a permanent family rupture, but outside the palace, the closed door was about to become a national symbol. The story broke through a single image: Camilla standing alone in a stone corridor, while a guarded door remained closed behind her. Within hours, the photograph was everywhere. Some saw cruelty, others saw consequence. Newspapers treated the ancient jewels as evidence of a hidden succession struggle, while crowds gathered demanding answers the palace could not safely provide. Yet the most powerful response came not from a commentator, but from Catherine's first public action after receiving the key. Palace communications confirmed that Catherine had attended a private heritage inspection, but officials refused to discuss the jewels, the custodial deed, or why Camilla had been denied entry. A custodial deed was the written authority naming who must protect an inheritance and control its future use. The refusal to explain it created a vacuum, and broadcasters filled that silence with talk of present rank colliding with future continuity. What began as a family trust dispute became a national argument about legitimacy, memory, and who truly represented the monarchy's next chapter. The morning edition of the London Chronicle carried the closed chamber door across its front page beneath the headline, "The Queen Left Out, Catherine Given the Key." Outside Buckingham Palace, a crowd gathered behind the barriers. One woman held a handwritten sign declaring, "Jewels are inherited, trust is earned." Television cameras returned to those words again and again, turning one stranger's message into the emotional verdict of the morning. Charles watched the coverage alone. Exhaustion replaced the authority he had carried into the corridor. When an advisor recommended a forceful denial, the king refused. He knew the public interpretation was incomplete, but he also knew its central facts were true. Camilla saw the photograph and felt her humiliation become permanent. The queen consort had surrendered the Wessex star in private, yet the world knew only that she had been left outside. Catherine called her before facing the public. She explained exactly what she intended to do, and promised there would be no triumph, no ancient necklace, and no gesture designed to deepen the wound. Camilla listened in silence, uncertain whether restraint could repair an image already seen by millions. Catherine arrived at a youth heritage reception wearing none of the revealed jewels. Instead, she announced that the Wessex collection would be conserved, documented, and eventually displayed in honor of the women who had protected it. Conservation meant preserving historic objects so age, damage, and personal ambition could not destroy them. She made clear that the collection would never become proof of her superiority. The palace then released a photograph of the recovered Wessex star inside its case. The statement acknowledged Edward's custodianship and Catherine's new responsibility, without blaming Camilla. Public anger began to soften, but the family still needed one final act to turn exclusion into settlement. The nation had seen the door, the key, and the jewel, but only one final family decision could determine whether the moment would be remembered as humiliation or renewal. The final answer came in the same chamber where the conflict began. Edward reopened the ancient door, Catherine returned with the Wessex star, and Charles arrived carrying the late Queen's letter. Camilla approached last. This time, no one left her waiting in the corridor. But neither was the original decision reversed. The family had discovered something more difficult than victory, a way to honor the truth, without allowing truth to become an instrument of revenge. Charles gathered Edward, Catherine, William, and Camilla for a final private settlement. He confirmed that the custodial deed would remain intact, and that the future queen would continue as guardian of the collection. The deed was the written authority, naming who must protect the jewels and control their future use. That mattered, because the decision could no longer be treated as a temporary favor or reversed by wounded pride. It would survive the present reign and protect the inheritance for those who came next. Edward faced Camilla and accepted that the first reveal had caused unnecessary pain. He did not apologize for obeying the late Queen's instructions, but he apologized for allowing duty to look like deliberate cruelty. The Earl admitted that closing the door without explanation had turned preservation into humiliation. She listened without interrupting, and for the first time, his regret reached her without sounding like another defense. Catherine opened the small case and placed the Wessex star into the empty space among the ancient jewels. It fitted perfectly. Camilla's private surrender had completed the inheritance exactly as intended. The queen consort entered the chamber as a family witness, not as custodian, and acknowledged that access, ownership, and acceptance were not the same thing. By hiding the final jewel, she had prolonged the fear she most wanted to escape. Catherine told Camilla that returning the star had protected the collection when pride could easily have destroyed it. The words did not erase their rivalry, but they restored dignity to the woman who had once been left outside. William watched the tension soften, understanding that his wife's authority would rest not on possession, but on restraint. Charles signed a family declaration recognizing Catherine's custodianship, Edward's continuing oversight, and the collection's preservation for the next generation, rather than any individual reign. A family declaration was a formal written agreement recording a shared royal decision. The king then handed the document to his brother, closing the dispute without pretending the pain had never existed. Edward waited until everyone had stepped into the corridor together. He closed the chamber door and gave the key openly to Catherine. Camilla watched without protest, standing beside Charles rather than outside alone. The ancient jewels had not overthrown one woman or crowned another. They had exposed a harder royal truth. Titles could command ceremony, but trust had to be earned, protected, and sometimes surrendered with grace. And so the door that began as an image of exclusion closed for the final time as something else entirely, a boundary between ambition and duty, leaving Catherine with the jewels, Camilla with her dignity, and the monarchy with a painful but complete renewal. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.